Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second half of the first day of the Luxembourg Internet Days 2020, all virtual. And as I said this morning, everything's different, but nothing's changed. Johan Lepassat was speaking about legacy systems. Here's another legacy system to my right. Koen Maris, formerly Atos, now PwC, who is going to help me moderate this panel. He has been doing that in the past years, so we end up being kind of an odd old couple. Before kicking off the panel, I would also like to thank our event partners and sponsors, Chamber of Commerce Luxembourg, Cybersecurity Luxembourg, the European Commission, which we very warmly welcome, the Luxembourg government with the Service des Médias et des Communications and the Ministry of Economy, BCE, EBRC, Flex Optics, Lux Network, Segecom, Lux Connect Post, Security Made in Alu, and Sesam. Voila. That being said, let's get into the heart of the matter. Let's get to the meat. For those joining us on the spot and who have not been reading emails, we have decided this year to place the Luxembourg Internet Days in a kind of completely invented, but maybe not that much invented crisis scenario, so you will be able to read that scenario on the front page of the event. And if you want to have a few ideas to kick off this afternoon's discussion, have a look at an email which you got about half an hour ago, which gives you a few lines of thinking of what we will address in the framework of data sovereignty and the difficult life after X. X can be a number of things and a number of alternative letters. So with us this afternoon are Nicolas Hamblenne from PwC Legal, Caroline Comet-Fraigneau from OVHcloud. Hello, Caroline.
Hello.
We have Per Gustavsson from Sweden, from Intraservice Göteborgs Stad. Hello, Per. And we have Philippe Duluc from Atos, and you have that black spot, which is Jelena Jelenovic from the European Investment Bank, who seems to have connection problems. We keep her on the panel, and as soon as we found her back in the virtual neon, we will have her join us. So, you had, I hope, a little time to have a sneak at that scenario which we invented for you, and at the lines of thought which you got via email. Nicolas, I see you on the screen, on the big window of the screen, but I will, with all due respect, start with Caroline. Caroline, what is your first line of thinking? You have seen that scenario, you have seen what we have presented to you. How does that talk to you?
Yes, so I have seen the last information you shared with us, and it's about
Caroline,
maybe.
I do not hear you. Is your mic eventually muted?
No, I can hear you.
No, it's okay. No,
It's okay for me.
Yeah.
No,
Is it
no
okay?
sound.
Do you hear me?
We can hear you. Well, at least I
We
can.
don't hear you.
Me too.
Okay. So.
Now we can
No,
hear you.
no, it's
Now it's perfect.
Yeah, it's
So,
okay. It's working.
sorry again. Let me start anew. Your lines of thinking about, well, the subject of today, or what at least the scenario has kind of tossed in terms of ideas, thoughts, lines of thinking on your end on data sovereignty and privacy.
Yeah, I have read that your scenario and the last information, and there is a kind of opposition between the rules, the GDPR that is very important in Europe, and the fact that it would prevent European tech companies to be competitive or innovative. So there is clearly this opposition in your document, and I'm not sure. I think we will have the opportunity to discuss that this is because of this kind of regulation, protection of users, that we have a lack of innovation, or maybe we can be late on some items. So this is my first thought.
Well, I take that, but we are very, very open, so it's very, very possible that we will get to that point. Are we foreclosing our own innovation potential by regulating or over-regulating a number of things. So that's very welcome. Per, any thoughts up front, out of the blue?
What I think, it's I would say this is just a regular Tuesday. It's nothing new. That this happens all the time. That we always have this with the challenge of the regulations compared to what we work with. But also with this scenario and what's happening is that the idea of a state is actually to protect its citizens from external threats. So from that point of view, I think it's really important that the state, or in this case European Union, protects its citizens' data, just as they protect our life, our house, whatever. It's the same. So from that point of view, I really like this scenario because it's so good.
Thank you, Per, for that. As I said to the people listening to us and attending the panel this morning, if you like the scenario, you have to send congratulations to Lucix. If you don't like it, you have to blame me. But that's fine. Philippe, any thoughts about the scenario, about the 2 or 3 ideas which you have heard from Caroline and from Per?
Yes, some ideas. I will speak as a CTO. I will speak about technology and innovation. I think that innovation can bring some solutions regarding, for example, problems of privacy on the cloud and so on. I take the example, for example, of a new way to encrypt data, homomorphic encryption, in which you can put some data, encrypted data, and have some computing on this data on cloud in other countries without any security. So we may have solutions, and we have just to innovate, to invest in innovation and to find solutions.
Exactly, which kicks the ball to a certain extent back to Caroline. Nicolas, your thoughts?
Yes, so far I agree with my co-panelists. So I'm a lawyer, so I will also speak, but from a legal perspective, let's say. I would say that the scenario is quite interesting, and we can see that the world we live in is quite complex. As Caroline said, there are some laws that are pointed out as perhaps obstacles, but also, and I would join Per on his comment, saying that sometimes, and this is the case for GDPR, the laws are protecting European fundamental rights. So it's not, you cannot see those as only obstacles, the laws. They are always and also protecting some interests and rights of citizens, so us in the end.
Yeah, I like what I hear, of course, but if I then look into practice, I see it as an obstacle that we have these GDPR constraints, and I believe, Per, that we need them because we need to protect our citizens and their data. That I believe in. But the problem is that people who make commercial decisions, well, they tend to take a solution that is perhaps outside of Europe because then it's easier to cope with it. And I think people from OVH and Atos can concur that they see that competition is harsh, and being in compliance with GDPR does not necessarily mean that you're cheaper or that I'm interested in as an organization. What do you think about that, guys?
We have to, for me, this is a value, and the fact that this GDPR is a question of freedom for the citizens. So with that point, I think there is no negotiation. It's too fundamental, too important. Then, I'm, as Philippe mentioned, there is an opportunity to innovate. And of course, the data are key for innovation, but there is ways to anonymize data, to protect the citizen and to get information that you can use with artificial intelligence or big data. So you don't need to have the very personal information, knowing that this guy is doing that and so on, to get important information to better target your business or make decisions in business day to day. So I think there are ways to protect our value, our principle in Europe that are, for me, the most important.
But do you also think that you can be competitive with all those constraints?
It's not a question of being competitive because we are. If I'm talking about OVHcloud in terms of price,
speak for yourself.
Price performance. We are very competitive because of the way we produce our services with end-to-end management. So at the end, if you think about price performance, we can have very good price performance. This is not an issue. Of course, where the big players might have some advantages today because they have kind of monopoly on very large scales in the big countries and worldwide. So and sometimes it's raised the question of the having trust. And we see even in the US, the government is wondering if we don't have two strong key players. So I think there are different ways to innovate. Respecting values, working as also together in Europe, building an ecosystem, and this is what we try to do with Gaia. Just maybe I leave the others to react.
Yeah.
Well, I know Koen is not going to like this because for once the US has copied Europe because the Consumer Privacy Act of California, which entered into force January 1st, 2020, is, I wouldn't say a blueprint, but it is very largely copied on GDPR. So at least for once we were a model. Maybe a bad model if I'm listening to you, but we were a model.
I leave that to Nicolas to decide if it's a bad model.
Yeah, well, we can see at this point that globally, maybe GDPR was the first real regulation on data protection, which is global, and we can see now that other states, other countries are developing that area in terms of protection, data protection, such as California, like you said, India, Canada, and so on. But although the CCPA, so the California Act, is, let's say, similar compared to the GDPR, it's not identical, if you want.
Yes.
So there are many differences between the GDPR and the CCPA. First, starting with the scope. So GDPR is a regulation that is first made for Europe. The scope is broader. It talks about individuals and data subjects, whereas the CCPA talks about consumer and Californian residents. So it's not the same level of regulation, if I may say.
Yep.
No, go ahead.
They share the same idea, of course. Yeah.
Per, you live in Sweden. Sweden is known to be very open on data compared to what I see in Belgium or Holland. You guys have a very transparent approach. How do you link that with GDPR?
Yeah, I would say that we are, I would say, we're a little bit naive. That we think that everyone is good, and no one will harm us in any way, and then we go ahead and use stuff. But what I would like to say is that I said that it's so easy with the big five to actually use their services, of course. But at the same time, there is no need for them to collect the data and process it in the US. They can do it in Europe, no problem at all. They don't need to have a connection to through the Atlantic to US. They can anonymize the data if they want to. But that's a business case that they have. They want to collect information and profile us. And if we turn this around, instead of saying that we have this centralized way of looking at information, if we turn it around and look at the business case, is that we say that information is egocentric. I own my own data and I just borrow it to other institutions and companies. Then there is a different business model, and that's where I see where the GDPR actually can help, because we say that it's your information and we just lend it for a certain time and we will give it back to you. And that will, if we harvest that concept, that's something that actually can drive innovation. And in this scenario, when everything, the hell breaks loose, then we have this loose coupling, and we have found ways also within share information, not this kind of information, but also the cyber critical information amongst us, because we have this egocentric temporal thought of how we handle information, instead of having this old thing that, oh, we put everything into one data center in US. No way.
Yes, and probably what you're saying, Per, is the first step also to do something which GDPR does not. I mean, let's not always fire at GDPR, but let's be honest, that is the awareness building. I mean, it is fine if you tell people that they need to say yes to treatment of their data, etc., etc., etc. But again, I mean, let's get back to the boilerplate. Who reads 5 pages of GDPR relevant information on an internet site than to click yes or to click no? Who reads the cookie policy on an internet site? Who reads all that stuff which basically is the stupid day-to-day GDPR reality, so to speak, to keep it really on the boilerplate? I mean, I know it's more sophisticated. I happen to be legally trained too, Nicolas, so I know what you are going to tell me, but it's the fundamentals are there. So true, I think if we go into that direction, which you suggest, then we get that awareness, which to me is not in the market and has not changed fundamentally since GDPR.
No, I have to answer, I give a thought on that, is that we are too old for this. Some of us are younger, but some of you others, but actually, you know, is that how we teach our kids what we teach in school. It's actually that don't share things, you know, with people that you don't know. That's a simple rule, you know, and you don't need to read 10 pages to actually say that. If it's too good to be true, it's most likely that way. You know, just the same when you're using Facebook or whatever other social media, and you teach your kids that, oh, look out for these people that just want to do you harm, you know, and talk to someone, you know. And I think that's the way this, instead of having these legal frameworks, you know, where you have all this reading that you need to do, it should not be that simple. Yep. You know, it shouldn't be necessary to read 10 pages to understand that, okay, if I share this information, they can do whatever they want with it. Then write that instead.
And honestly speaking, also what we see is that the people are more and more sensitive to that topic. And for example, there is more and more ad blocker, you know, to prevent from tracking on internet. People don't want to be followed and so on. So I think that there is really an awareness of the consumer about this data protection, and they can act when they refuse to receive a newsletter or things like this. So they have some rights. And also for the company, the day-to-day policies the companies have to manage, and really being careful about the way they manage the customer data or even the employee data to be sure that they respect the rules. So probably it's more complex for the company because it can be very technical. So to be sure that we are fully in line with all the rules. But today it's part of the company day-to-day activity, and consumers are more and more aware about it and acting.
I agree and I disagree with you, Caroline, because to me the newsletter is the tip of the iceberg. Before you're getting to saying yes or no to a newsletter, we have probably clicked 25 data sets yes without even being aware of what exactly is communicated, what is done with your data and for what purpose it is collected. Now I know that all this should be somewhere on the internet site which does that to be GDPR compliant, etc., etc., etc. Let's not go further into that. Well, we can obviously go further into that, but let's not forget that we have another topic which is also a topic of the day, and that is data sovereignty, which obviously is related to GDPR and to a number of elements around GDPR. And Philippe, or do you want to make a comment still on what you have heard from Per and Caroline and Nicolas?
Yes, just a comment about to finish with the GDPR. First, it's an important law and very efficient. Why it is efficient? It's because the fine is so huge. The potential fine is so huge. It's 5%, if I remember well, of the revenue. And this law may raise difficulty, competitiveness difficulty. I take an example, very simple. We are meeting in Atos. We are developing AI systems, AI models. We have to train these models with a lot of data. An example, if you want a system to analyze the face on a video, on a photo. You have to train with a lot of photos, and these photos are covered by the GDPR. And to anonymize, it's not so easy because before anonymizing, you have to have this photo, and that means that you can access European companies. You can access only a small data set which are commercially available. In the same times, our competitors in US, in China, they have not these difficulties. And you know that the more you have a lot of images to train your models, the more efficient is the model.
Yes. Yes. Any reaction to that before we switch to, I would say, the data sovereignty part of life?
I have a small reaction, if I can.
Yes, go on.
I would agree that sometimes the regulations and the laws could be seen as obstacles, as already been saying, but I think it's a question of value. What are you putting as a priority? Do you put the fundamental rights at first or the commercial advantage that you may have? And besides that question, I would say that even with the GDPR, you can be a profitable company because you can somehow make it work while complying with the laws. And also I would like to mention that GDPR and any other global data protection law are quite recent. 5 years ago, we were not talking that much about data protection. So as you know, technology is way faster than the regulations. So we need maybe sometimes that the dust settles and we will see the evolutions of the case law and so on, and maybe we will find some interesting solutions to combine, for example, a GDPR with the blockchain or with AI and so on. So we cannot solve everything in a week or in a year. We need some time maybe.
Okay. Koen, we didn't invite you here just because you are the sexiest Belgian in Luxembourg, but also to do a little work. Come on, kick off.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, but data sovereignty is a bit more than just personal data, that's for sure. And if I read what is going on, we are just at the end of the line in Europe, to be honest. We have this initiative Gaia X, and we have Euro HPC, where we will have a lot of data in both environments. But compared to what the US is doing, or in Google, Microsoft, or the Alibabas in the Asian part of the world, do we need still data sovereignty? And yes, why would you think it's so crucial for us Europeans?
Big sign.
I have to answer that. It's just, I go back to this, the fundamental thing why we have a state, and if you cannot protect your, I would say the housing, whatever you have, the lands, whatever, it's just to give up all the, just like saying that we are giving up the ownership of our land. It's the same thing to say that we give away our data. It's we can give away data, but then it should be purposeful. We should gain something from it, from whatever reason it could be, but it must be a payback while you're doing it, or you're sharing it just because you're good, but it should not be that you don't think about it. And one thing with this, since we have these large companies within US and European companies leave Europe to go to US, so why is it better in California to scale a business than in Europe? That's one thing that I think of is important, is and also is that why this with the data sovereignty, why do we how should I put it, when we are doing these programs within European Union as Gaia X and other things, we do it in a way that we think that we should build something, but looking at these other standards, it says nothing that you have the government and research agencies have built a standard. It has evolved from a purpose that you have a need for it, and then actually build business around it. And making, I would say, a data storage of all data will not work, because should that be governed by the government? it will not work. But you can do information models and things that and the APIs that helps do the interaction. But I think that data sovereignty is really important for us.
Anyone else an idea on this topic?
Yeah, I think yes, the initiative of Gaia-X is very key because it's also somewhat in a way the European project. It's part of the European project being all together. The idea, whatever the business we are talking about, is to be stronger. We know it's not an easy path because we know there are a lot of difficulties to agree on everything. But at least now we have an initiative, and this is pretty new, that is allowing to federate, to have tech companies in Europe working together to build a new value proposition for cloud. And this value proposition is based on open standards. So the fact that reversible standards, you are not locked in when you take one of the provider of Gaia-X, and some transparency. So the idea is to build this standard and to develop together common solutions covering the different layers and from infrastructure as a service to software that are able to work together and that build a stronger value prop to the market. So this is pretty new. Maybe we could say we could have done that before. This has been done many years before, but I think it's not too late. And it's very key that we do that for the future. To ensure that we have some data sovereignty, because this is a way to ensure that the way our data are protected is consistent with our value. And at the end, we come back always to the same topic: how do we ensure that what we do with data that are more and more important is compatible with our value in Europe?
But then let me play the devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Are end users waiting for this, and are corporations ready to leave, let's say, Office 365 to go to an open standard managed and maintained in Europe, and whatever that solution might be? And I'm making it very blunt and simple now. If so, then me as an end user, I'm still using Android or iPhone or perhaps a new platform that evolves later on, which is probably based on something from the US, linked to a lot of cloud services, where I put a lot of my personal data as a European citizen. How can we overcome that?
I think, but today in the way we build cloud, and I will leave others speaking, but we use American technologies like VMware, Nutanix, and recently we have announced we are going to use Atos platform from Google. So it means that this is possible to have, the progress, the benefits of an application, but in a way that ensures sovereignty because of the way it is managed, the way the data are stored, and the rules that are applied to this, to this data management. So it's not black and white, you see?
No, but that makes it difficult, of course. I fully agree with your explanation. How do you see it, Philip? Because you're also close to this domain.
Perhaps I will comment about the topic. I totally agree with the fact that this is not a black and white problem. Even if you use an American cloud, we have solutions in step by step in which you can increase the level of security. It will not be 100% security, but you have various steps. For example, who is creating the keys to encrypt the data? For example, where these keys are stored? Do you manage personally, your company, these keys? And we see that we have various steps increasing the level of security of the solutions, and that means you increase the difficulty for an hacker to get this data. It's not 100% because for 100% security, we have something else. We have in each country we have very strong regulations for the states to protect the state secrets. In France, we have two levels, secret and top secret, and we have very strong regulation for that. It is for the data which are vital for the country. So it's not black and white. And I think that the country has always the solution to protect totally its vital data.
Thank you.
I have a comment from the audience, interestingly enough, a comment which basically says, well, how about if we were to resolve that data sovereignty issue with data going east or west, because let's be very generic. What if we were to simply break up those monopolies or oligopolistical structures, the GAFAs, not to name them, if we were to break them up into smaller entities, and that would probably resolve part of the issue, which is anyway, well, it's on the agenda without being on the agenda. This is a topic which has been discussed time and time again. Now there is a commission or a committee of the US House of Representatives which is seriously investigating the issue. There are a number of things happening at the level of the European Commission, but would breaking up be a solution, or really be a solution?
Yeah, so I have a comment on this. If I've understood correctly, in the scenario, there is something that is suggested with Norway, for example, to create some sort of data embassy or data freeport, and that could be interesting, Norway or another country. But the interesting fact about Norway, for example, is that it's not the EU member state, but it's part of the EEA,
yes.
So European Economic Area, and therefore it's also subject to European laws and therefore also subject to EU fundamental rights. So if we point out at specific countries such as Norway, that could be interesting, or we could think also about another solution which would be based on some sort of blockchain, so decentralized solution where part of the data would be hosted a bit everywhere, but I'm not an IT expert, and I don't know if that would be possible from an IT aspect, but that could be interesting. And as a lawyer, I would also remind that for me, the notion of sovereignty is about the control. So you only have sovereignty over data or over assets if you have control over those assets. So I agree with the comment of Philippe that says that regarding encryption keys, the question is all about who holds the keys and then detains the control. So yeah, that could be part of the solution.
I will tell you in a one-on-one conversation, Nicolas, why Norway, because that was my funny idea, but I will tell you that off the record. I welcome Jelena, whom we do not see, but I understand she is there sound-wise.
Yes, I'm there with you as well.
Hello, Jelena.
Sorry.
I don't know when you came in. I guess it was a couple of minutes ago. What is your line of thinking about what you have been hearing now, among others, from Nicolas?
Well, I do agree with Nicolas on things, and I do agree that it's not black or white. Also, from another panelist that said the same, and I very much agree with this. Also, GDPR is not a bad thing. Every state tries to protect themselves one way or the other, and there is no difference. Also, that the EU is trying to protect the data and their people and their citizens and residents of the EU. So this whole aspect I agree with, and I think there are solutions. There are also security solutions. There's also anonymization of data that has to be there. But also we cannot forget to think about some of the key principles of GDPR, like, there are 7 key principles there. Lawfulness, we have a lot of legal people here, fairness and transparency over the data, purpose and limitation of that data, and purpose of why we limit to protect people. Same what US is doing at the same time. Now for the West and East world, and the question, I didn't hear it fully, but indeed cyberspace is something that's viewed as a global transformer or political order, and unfortunately every state has its own agenda. Now, it would be good that they come together and they form some kind of a coalition together. But this is something that is still far away from all of us. And I think the states still need to talk a lot about this. But in the meanwhile, I believe that all of us should follow our laws. I don't think they're restrictive. so much, and I think they actually, in fact, protect people. Then again, there are technical ways of securing the data, such as encrypting it, and having on legal terms, having contracts on who and when and how they can see the data and how it can be transferred to those who need to see it in their hands and protect it from others. So I didn't hear the whole question, but I hope I answered some of it.
Yeah.
The whole question, Jelena, was based on a comment from one of our auditors, spectators, or participants, silent participants, so to speak, who said, well, would breaking up the big data companies east or west, would that not be a possible solution with regard to our data sovereignty problem or our data sovereignty discussion?
No.
Now I have to say something. It's too useless to do that, because you will just find other legal constructs and you will start, buying companies, and you will not know who actually owns the companies. And then you still will exchange information between companies, so it doesn't mean anything at all. And the other part is that, okay, the consumers, will they leave Office 365? Of course they will, if there is something better. And LibreOffice, that is an open platform, is not better. It's not there. And thinking that actually this, that we create a European program to build an application, without a real business model, just the business model, it should be there to be open. That's the wrong incentive to actually build something. You should build it to be better than Office 365, better than Google Suite, for education, whatever. It must be much better. Then the customers will leave the platform. Yes, otherwise, never.
I agree with you, Per. I would have said it in slightly different terms. If you break up your enemy, does not make your enemy disappear. You create more smaller enemies. Voilà. And that's the way I would have said it, with all due respect to all the people I know at Google, Microsoft, Apple, and so forth, which are definitely not my enemies, but it was just to take that warrior type argumentation. Caroline, you wanted to react on that one.
Just maybe, because this is not the question of the big five, this is more the American rules and law, and it will be the same with all internet provider that will have that will offer service to European provider. If we have the same laws, we have the same issue. So it's not a question of who is providing these services.
I want to come back to something I've heard during the discussions, and I agree that the one who holds the keys holds the control of the data, but to some extent only. Because holding the keys and giving me encryption mechanisms to store data in a cloud that is not falling in Europe and not considered data sovereignty does not give me any control on the availability of data. So there could be a point, and let's hope we never face that this could be used as a ransom or an economic pressure thing that can be used against the country. If I have access to your data just because it's physically stored with me, I can also take away that access for you and use it as a pressure mechanism. And now I'm looking into the very dark side of the future, but if the United States or in Asia, a country has a lot of data of one country in Europe, of course they could create havoc just by not giving that access. So that is why I think we need data sovereignty. But of course, you are the experts and you're free to give another opinion on that.
No, I agree with you, say. You speak about availability. I think that the cloud, somebody has told that a cloud was finally that your data were in the data center of somebody else. I think you are right. Thanks to technology, thanks to innovation, we may have high level of guarantee about the confidentiality and about the integrity of the data, but we will never, by principle, guarantee about availability, for sure. You are right. I think you are right.
Other reactions?
I also agree.
I agree also, and I think that it's sometimes we focus on the US instead of focusing on that. Actually, we have a lot of data centers within Europe that are, of course, managed. They are owned by the big five, whatever. The only thing that they do so that we keep is that they show that they are not in control of their US mother companies and cut off the Atlantic cable for that.
Okay. Jelena, you had a reaction.
I mean, I agree also with the previous panelist as well. I mean, let's have their data as well. What is the problem with us trying to have and I agree also with moderators, we need our data sovereignty here. Indeed, we do. And what is so bad about protecting our data here as much as US protects their data? I feel like we are constantly under attack by US on this, and we are following the rules, strict rules and everything, yet they at the same time have rights to see and have the gag orders to go into our data without us knowing anything. So at least we have transparency over the GDPR and full transparency and fairness. So I do agree that we need data sovereignty, and I agree with the previous panelists. Let's have their data more here so that we leverage it.
Yeah, I like the concept. I'm in favor.
Thank you. So let's just launch a good PR campaign out there globally.
Yeah.
Are you proposing financing by the EIB, Jelena?
Oh gosh, no.
I take it. Okay, it's always good to see a light-hearted panel. Ladies and gentlemen, we are getting close to the end of the story. Again, not resolved any question, but spilled around a lot of good ideas and lines of thinking. Any last statement from you, Nicolas?
I think it's a question of perspective. We are talking from a European perspective. If we have the same panel with US experts or Asian experts, they will also have different point of views, which comes again to the conclusion that sovereignty for every member state or region is quite important. And maybe I'm too optimistic, but I hope that in a near future, in a few years, we will agree internationally on some basics or some fundamentals about data sovereignty or data protection. And let's hope that we will have some sort of shared approach. I think it's utopic. It's a dream that we will all agree on, let's say, a GDPR model. I don't think that will ever be the case, but at least to agree on some basic principles and fundamentals.
I think, let me just react on what you said, Nicolas. I mean, there's these, from a legal point of view, we have seen there are a number of international instruments out there which regulate a lot of things, like international maritime agreements, etc., etc. The reason why we have those is because the technology underlying or the way things are done have not been changing tremendously over the past 25 to 30 years. Technology evolves. But on the other side, we should eventually free ourselves from the fact that we will always run after technology, because data usage has changed, evolved, yes, but we are contributing data via the internet over the past 25 years. So we had 25 years time thinking about international instruments which would bring us to some kind of culturally mutual or culturally oriented mutual understanding and cooperation on the data side and on the data sovereignty side. That's just a throw-in from my side.
What is 25 years? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, 25 years is nothing to negotiate an international instrument, I know, but it's at least it's a generation.
I think I also agree a bit with legal on things, and that it is a different perspective perhaps for us, and we do feel like we are more attacked perhaps with US having the gag orders and things, which in fact we actually don't even have such gag orders like US, that we don't notify a person at all. But I think this topic about data sovereignty is very controversial in the diplomatic circles when you look at it in general. And then you have some countries, in fact, that are just being adamant about controlling information within their borders. And, you know, this information is used as a weapon that is so strong, it can weaken this national unity and government legitimacy and core values. But I think the Western governments, and it's also including us, they all agree that there should be some rules. I might be wrong, so agree with me, but they all, I believe, agree that there should be some rules over certain content, via internet and our data. But they're also supportive of protecting that global infrastructure and operations, rather than only having government control over citizens' rights to what they can see. But I really agree that EU should continue having such rights until they, on a global level, have some coalition that they agree on. So there's nothing wrong with what you're doing at the moment with our country.
Caroline.
Or the continent.
Yeah, I think we have said a lot of things. So I think we are getting more and more mature about this topic, and people and companies and government are more and more aware about this issue. We see it day after day with the discussion we have with them. So, and I think this is an opportunity also to build some strong value proposition also in Europe, because I think if we miss this topic of this tech topic in Europe, we will be just a tourist destination. But it's very important that we keep on developing skills and value prop in Europe also on tech. So this is sovereignty. This is also our ability to be autonomous in the future. Otherwise, we'll just rely on others.
Indeed.
Hey, Caroline, that there are enough museums in the world about dinosaurs and things like that, and Europe should not become another dinosaur-type museum.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. Per?
Yeah, I ask a question that put this in a context. How much US, Chinese, and Russian citizen personal identifiable information do we process within Europe? I would say it's very little, because they see that the data sovereignty of their their citizens' information should stay in their countries. And also, it's just looking within Europe, when looking in Sweden, how much of German and data from Netherlands are processed, social security numbers, personal information in Sweden? Very little. And that's the reason for that, because you want to have this data sovereignty that protect your citizens. So from that perspective, it's not an issue, saying, oh, we should share it. I say, no way. We need to have that, and actually, as the European Union, as the states, to protect our citizens' personal information, their assets. That's the responsibility that the government actually has. And from that, we can build a lot of innovation if we think of egocentric and turn around and get it more interesting to use the capacity that we have in Europe instead of exporting that knowledge away.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Philippe, maybe the last word for you.
Yes, as the last word, I think we have discussed a lot about citizen privacy. I think it's clear. I agree with what has been said by the co-panelists. But we should not forget, perhaps for the next time, to discuss also about business secret, company data, because in this case the situation is far more complex, because we have international companies having business in all the parts of the world. I think it's far more complex.
I agree. I think we haven't elaborated on that, but that would be a round table on its own, I think, if we are talking business secrets and international business, especially if you look at your organization spread around the world. It must be difficult to keep that data sovereignty, and I don't think it's a lot different for OVH, for example. Thank you for that. Do we have questions?
I have 2 or 3 comments from the audience with which I would close this, because otherwise we are going to be way beyond schedule. One of the remarks or lines of thinking was AT&T's breakup created a formidable telecom market revival surge that we are still enjoying today, not mentioning the surge of the internet. Another comment was financing European solutions by the EIB is not stupid at all. Sorry for that. Jelena, you will never talk to me again, but that's what the audience took from this one. And the other one was, it's not only a question of personal data or data, it's also a question of industrial development and jobs, and the European inventions stay in Europe. Let me quote Skype. Voila. That being said, a great many thanks to all of you. I will leave the last of the last sentences to your motto, so to speak. So,
well, I think we agree today that data sovereignty is something important and that we need to look beyond GDPR and personal data, that's for sure. I also, when I especially think about our Sweden guest, Per, well, data is egocentric from nature, especially when we are talking about personal data. So we need to, I think, as a user or an end user, think about that as well. And of course, those who hold the keys hold the power to some extent, because of course it doesn't cover availability, but it gives you control to the data. So it's important not to leave your keys flying around on the internet, I think. So thank you very much to all panelists. It was really a joy to discuss this topic with you, and I hope to see you soon somewhere else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.